when a woman is publicly declared fit only to be a concubine, when her dignity is ground into the cobblestones of the capital, when everyone assumes she will quietly wither away in the desert winds of the western regions, she instead spends 7 years forging herself into the sharpest blade imaginable. Let us observe. The day before my wedding, rain fell upon the capital without cease. The betrothal gifts sent from the Prince of Jing's residence arrived thoroughly soaked. Dark stains spread across the crimson silk like ink bleeding through paper, rather fitting for my state of mind at that moment. My name is Shen Wenqing. I am the legitimate daughter of the Grand Tutor and the betrothed of Prince Xiao Yan of Jing, a match arranged before either of us drew our first breath. Tomorrow was meant to be my day of glory, a wedding procession stretching 10 li entry into the prince's household, transformation into the most envied woman in the capital. Yet here stood Xiao Yan at my family's gate, letting the icy rain soak through his black ceremonial robes embroidered with 4 clawed golden dragons. Behind him cowered a trembling, delicate figure, my half-sister, Shen Miaro. Shen Wenqing, I am breaking off this engagement. His voice cut colder than the autumn rain. Each word was a blade dipped in ice, stabbing deep into my heart. Father shook with rage, pointing at him in fury. Your Highness, do you understand what you are saying? Wenqing's betrothal to you was blessed by the late Emperor's own hand. You cannot simply cast it aside. Xiao Yan laughed coldly, drawing Shen Miaro into his embrace. His eyes held a tenderness and resolve I had never seen directed at me. The only woman I shall ever love is Ruwa. If I must marry, it will be her alone who becomes my princess. He paused, his gaze cutting toward me like a sword, filled with undisguised contempt and disgust. As for you, Shen Wenqing, if you insist on entering my household, I suppose that could be arranged. But the position of principal wife, forget it. Out of respect for the Grand Tutor, I can offer you a place as a concubine. Concubine. The word exploded in my ears like thunder, leaving me dizzy and disoriented. I, the legitimate daughter of the Grand Tutor, the most celebrated young lady of letters in the capital, in his eyes, I was fit only to be a kept woman, a position of shame. The whispers of gathered guests and servants pricked at me like countless needles, flaying me alive. Those faces that had once gazed upon me with envy and flattery now wore expressions of gleeful schadenfreude. I saw Shen Miaro nestled in Xiao Yan's arms, her tearful eyes glinting with triumph, as she silently mouthed the words, "Sister, I am so sorry." In that moment my heart died. It was my maternal uncle, General Zhou Yi, defender of the northwestern frontier, who wrapped his black cloak around my wretched form, shielding me from prying eyes. He wasted no words. He simply looked at me with eyes weathered by countless campaigns and said in a low voice, "Qing'e, this capital is no place for you. Come with me to the western regions. The sky is vast there, the land endless. No one will dare make you suffer." That night I did not weep. I did not rage. As father beat his chest in anguish and mother sobbed inconsolably, I changed into practical men's clothing and slipped away under cover of darkness, escorted by my uncle's personal guard. The carriage wheels clattered over the cobblestones. I looked back one final time at the Prince of Jing's residence, that place that had once held all my girlish dreams, and made a silent vow, "Xiao Yan, Shen Miaro. I will remember this day's humiliation." To the road ahead is long. We shall see who has the last laugh. I was gone for 7 years. The desert winds of the western regions hardened my skin and hardened my heart. In those early years, I traveled with my uncle's merchant caravans. I learned to read ledgers, to distinguish spices and gemstones, to haggle with bearded foreign traders. I cut my waist-length hair and bound it back like a young man's. I ate sand, I drank snowmelt. I lost my way in the desert and nearly died beneath a bandit's curved blade. My uncle and his guards risked their lives to save me. Watching a guard bleed from wounds taken on my behalf, I understood for the first time weakness and tears are the most useless things in this world. To survive, to avoid being trampled upon, one must become strong. I began learning the languages of the Western kingdoms, studying trade routes, leveraging the knowledge I had brought from the capital and my uncle's connections. Gradually, I carved out a reputation along the desert trading paths. I was no longer the sheltered Grand Tutor's daughter who knew only poetry and painting. I became the mysterious merchant known throughout the 36 kingdoms of the western regions. Master Qing. Mi Qingfeng Trading House monopolized the most precious silk, porcelain, and tea flowing between the western regions and the central plains. My camel trains knew the desert better than the bandits themselves. My wealth commanded respect even from Western royalty. 7 years was sufficient to transform a naive young girl into a woman of deep calculation and iron will. Strategic commentary. After being stripped of her 2 core social assets, reputation and marriage, Shen Wanqing did not spiral into emotional turmoil. Instead, she swiftly changed lanes, pivoting from bride-in-waiting to commercial titan. This represents a classic preliminary positioning for what military strategists call dimensional superiority. While your opponents still measure you by the old rules, you have already established absolute dominance in an entirely new arena. 7 years is quite enough time to transform from a chess piece into the one moving the pieces. When I set foot in the capital again, it was early summer. The city remained as it ever was, prosperous, bustling, yet everything had changed. Father had passed away in my 3rd year of absence, worn down by grief. Mother had retreated to our ancestral home in the south. The Shen family residence now belonged to Shen Miaoru's birth mother, a concubine elevated to principal wife. And Xiao Yan had long since married Shen Miaoru, exactly as he wished. I heard their wedding day had been magnificent, a procession stretching 10-li splendor beyond compare. He had given her every luxury a woman could dream of, and she had become the exalted princess of Jing. For 7 years they had been celebrated throughout the capital as a match made in heaven. I had not returned for revenge, not directly. I had come for a far grander enterprise. I intended to establish the capital's most magnificent emporium of exotic treasures named Yunding Tower, and thereby complete the trade route linking the western regions to the central plains. The location I chose was Vermilion Bird Street, the city's most prestigious thoroughfare, directly opposite the Prince of Jing's residence. On opening day, I reserved the capital's finest restaurant, Wangjiang Moon, and hosted every person of consequence. I appeared as Master Qing, a striking figure in a flame-red western gown, a vermilion mark between my brows, my face half concealed behind an ornate silver mask. My entrance sent ripples through the capital's elite circles. They marveled at my wealth, speculated about my origins, and fell captive to the extraordinary Western treasures I had brought, things they had never seen before. Midway through the evening, as I exchanged pleasantries with the Minister of Revenue, a commotion arose at the entrance. His Highness the Prince of Jing and Her Highness, the Princess, have arrived. My hand, holding the wine cup, paused briefly, then steadied. I raised my eyes. Xiao Yan approached with Shen Miaoru on his arm. 7 years had not diminished his striking appearance, though his brow now carried the weight of maturity and authority, along with a weariness not easily detected. Beside him, Shen Miaoru wore the elaborate regalia of a princess, dripping with jewels. Her beauty remained, but her eyes and the set of her mouth betrayed the arrogance of long-held privilege and a certain petty dissatisfaction. Their gazes naturally fell upon me, the evening's host. Xiao Yan's eyes lingered on me a moment, curious, appreciative, but clearly he did not recognize me. Hardly surprising. My skin was now a healthy honey tone. My bearing possessed the confident ease of Western women. I bore no resemblance to the fragile Shen Wanqing of years past. Shen Miaoru, however, showed a flash of unmistakable jealousy the instant she saw me. A woman's instincts are rarely wrong. She sensed a threat. You must be the famous Master Qing. Xiao Yan began, his voice still pleasantly deep. They say you rival nations in wealth. Having met you, I see your presence matches your reputation. I inclined my head slightly, my voice flat. Your Highness is too kind. My coolness seemed to catch him off guard. He was accustomed to fawning deference. Shen Miaoru laughed prettily, clinging to his arm. Husband, this Master Qing is certainly mysterious, refusing even to show her face, though I must say that gown is rather unusual, which seamstress made it. I should like to have one made myself. Her words masqueraded as compliments while implying my attire was outlandish and unsuitable for polite society. Before I could respond, the Minister of Revenue chuckled and intervened. Your Highness may not be aware, Master Qing's gown is woven from fire silk of the western regions. An inch of thread costs an inch of gold. It resists both flame and water. The embroidery depicts the royal totems of an ancient Western kingdom, reserved exclusively for royalty. This single garment is worth half a gold mine. Shen Miaro's expression soured instantly. I raised my cup in a distant toast, a faint smile playing at my lips behind the mask. Strategic commentary, rather than seeking direct revenge. She positions herself as a solution provider, using transactional leverage to make Xiaoyan voluntarily remove Shen Miaru from the board. If your highness fancies it, I have several bolts at Yunding Tower. The price is rather steep, I am afraid, but surely the prince's household can manage. I placed deliberate emphasis on the word manage before arriving in the capital. I had thoroughly investigated. The Prince of Jing's household appeared prosperous, but was hollow within. Xiaoyan held a princely title but no real power. His income was limited, sustained only by a few estates and shops. Shen Miaru's extravagant tastes had long since outstripped their means. Predictably, Xiaoyan's expression darkened. Shen Miaru forced a smile. A few bolts of fabric, naturally I can afford them, but you, Master Qing, building a business alone in the capital, that cannot be easy. Should you encounter difficulties, do come to the prince. For the sake of, well, as fellow merchants, he would certainly assist. She had nearly said for my father's sake, but caught herself invoking her status as a former concubine's daughter would hardly enhance her dignity as princess. I smiled coldly to myself, my face betraying nothing. I thank your highness for the kind thought. However, I make it a rule never to ask favors. Anything that money can solve is no problem at all. My words were supremely arrogant and supremely confident. The assembled guests drew sharp breaths, exchanging knowing glances at the princess. That evening, I commanded every eye in the room, while the celebrated golden couple served merely as the backdrop to my entrance. I knew this was only the beginning. After Yunding Tower opened, business exceeded all expectations. It became the favorite haunt of the capital's noble ladies and young heiresses. I stocked the latest Western jewelry, the rarest perfumes, even dancing girls from distant lands and talking parrots. If you had money, you could buy anything your heart desired. Shen Miaru became a regular customer. She seemed determined to prove the prince's household could match my prices, salvaging the face she had lost that first evening. Each visit was a grand production, an entourage of servants, an air of importance, and she invariably selected the most expensive items. I instructed my manager to extend her credit. The bills piled up like snowflakes at the prince's residence, yet payment never came. One day, as I reviewed accounts in my private chamber on the top floor, my trusted attendant Amma N entered quietly. Mistress, the princess has returned. She has brought several young ladies from the Duke of N's household. She has chosen a blood phoenix hairpin from the Western tribute, 3,000 gold taels, and wishes to put it on account. I set down my ledger and walked to the window, which afforded a clear view of the main hall below. Shen Miaru was preening before a mirror, the hairpin a stunning piece of deep crimson that seemed to glow from within, adorning her hair. She showed it off to her companions. You see, only someone of my standing can carry off such a piece. Master Qing herself said there is only one in the entire realm. One young lady sighed enviously. Your highness is so fortunate. The prince must adore you. 3,000 gold for a hairpin, purchased without a second thought. Shen Miaru's vanity swelled visibly. She laughed with delight. I smiled coldly and turned to Amanen. Go down and inform the princess that Yunding Tower is running a grand opening promotion. Today, all purchases must be paid in full, no credit. She may either pay the gold now or leave the hairpin behind. Amanen departed to deliver the message. Soon, raised voices drifted up from below. What do you mean, no credit? Do you know who I am? I am the Princess of Jing. Where is your proprietor? Amaren's reply was calm and measured. Your Highness, please do not be offended. This is our proprietor's policy, applied equally to all customers. If you doubt me, you are welcome to speak with her directly. Shen Miaru stormed upstairs in a fury. When she flung open the door and saw me serenely sipping tea, she froze. Your Highness, it has been some time. I set down my cup and rose, the silver mask still in place. Master Ching, what is the meaning of this? Are you deliberately humiliating me? She demanded. I smiled faintly. Your Highness misunderstands. I am merely a merchant. Goods exchanged for payment, fair dealing for all. That is my way. Your Highness has accumulated debts here totaling 70 or 80,000 taels of silver, none of it repaid. Yonding Tower may be large, but it cannot sustain such generosity indefinitely. Today's 3,000 gold must be settled on the spot. Otherwise, I shall be obliged to send collectors to the prince's residence publicly. You wouldn't dare. Shen Miaoru's face went white. Debt collectors at the prince's door. The scandal would be unthinkable. Her reputation as princess would be ruined. Try me. I stepped closer, lowering my voice so only she could hear. Shen Miaoru, surely you don't imagine that 7 years as princess have made everyone forget where you came from. A concubine's daughter who clawed her way up through unspeakable means should always be prepared for the fall. She recoiled, trembling, staring at me with dawning horror. Who are you? I did not answer. I simply held her gaze. Something in my eyes made her step back involuntarily. She glimpsed something familiar there, something that chilled her to the bone in the end. She removed the hairpin with shaking hands and fled Yunding Tower amid the titters and whispers of onlookers. I knew she would run weeping to Xiaoyan, and that was precisely what I was counting on. Sure enough, within 3 days, the prince's household steward arrived in person. He delivered full payment for all outstanding debts and presented a gilt-edged invitation. Prince Xiaoyan of Jing wished to meet with me privately. I examined the invitation, a cold smile curving my lips. The fish had taken the bait. The prince's residence looked much as it had 7 years ago, though the pavilions and gardens now carried a faded, weary air that had not been there before. Xiaoyan received me in his study. He dismissed all servants, leaving only the 2 of us. He did not sit, instead. He stood at the window with his hands clasped behind his back, gazing at the withered lotus in the pond. His silhouette seemed somehow diminished. Master Ching, who are you really? Why do you persist in targeting my wife? He came straight to the point, his voice tight with suppressed anger. I crossed to the opposite side of the room, settled myself comfortably, and poured my own tea. Your Highness speaks strangely. I am merely a merchant conducting business. The princess shops at my establishment. I welcome her custom. But debts must be repaid. That is only natural. How does that constitute targeting? You knew perfectly well she couldn't produce such sums. Xiaoyan spun around, his gaze sharp as a hawk's. From the moment you appeared in this capital, I sensed something amiss. Your manner, your eyes, they feel familiar. And why do you always wear that mask? He advanced toward me step by step, his presence oppressive. Who are you? I lifted my teacup, blew gently on the floating leaves, and replied without haste. Does it matter who I am? Your Highness need only know that I am someone who can solve your problems. What problems? He frowned. Your position at the Ministry of War has hit rather a rough patch lately, has it not? I understand a shipment of grain bound for the Northwestern Army was intercepted en route. His Majesty is furious and has given you 1 month to recover it, or lose your rank and title. Am I correct? Xiaoyan's pupils contracted sharply. How do you know this? It is classified. Only a handful of people in the entire court are aware. I laughed softly. I not only know about it, I know the grain was never actually stolen. It was secretly swapped for sand-contaminated old rice by agents of the Third Prince. The real grain is currently hidden at a private estate outside the city. Once the month expires and you fail to deliver, the Third Prince will expose the matter to His Majesty and have you charged with dereliction of duty and endangering military operations. Xiaoyan's face drained of color. He stared at me, veins standing out on his temples. What do you want, Simple? I set down my cup and rose, meeting his eyes directly. I will help you recover the grain and weather this crisis. In return, you will agree to one condition. What condition? Divorce Shen Miaoru. Make me your principal wife. I spoke each word with perfect clarity. The air seemed to freeze. Xiaoyan looked at me as though I had lost my mind. After a long moment, he forced out a cold laugh. You, a Western merchant of unknown origin, dare covet the position of my princess. You must be dreaming. Whether it is a dream, your highness will soon discover. I met his gaze without flinching. I know you married Shen Miaro for the Shen family's influence and her reputation as a lucky star. But the Shen family has long since fallen, and this so-called lucky star, what has she brought you besides endless trouble and extravagance? You claim to love her, but have these 7 years made you happy? Your career has stalled, your ambitions remain unfulfilled, and every evening you return home to a shallow woman who cares only for showing off and spending. Xiaoyan, ask yourself honestly, is this truly the life you wanted? My words were a scalpel, slicing through his carefully maintained facade to expose the rot beneath. His face turned ashen, his lips moved, but no sound emerged. I, on the other hand, can give you everything you desire. I continued. My wealth can fill the holes in your household accounts and free you from financial worry. My connections can help you secure your footing at court and counter the third prince. My trading house can provide a steady stream of military funds and supplies. With my support, everything you have lost can be reclaimed. Even the position of crown prince may not be beyond reach. I painted for him a vision of extraordinary allure. Each word striking precisely where he was most vulnerable, most hungry. He wavered. I saw it in the rapid rise and fall of his chest, in the flickering uncertainty of his eyes, his struggle, his greed. Why would you help me? What do you gain? What I seek, I said, has been the same from the very beginning. I raised my hand and slowly removed the mask from my face. When the features that had haunted his midnight dreams for 7 years appeared clearly before him, Xiaoyan staggered backward as though struck by lightning, knocking over a chair. Shen Wanxing. The name seemed torn from between his teeth. His eyes filled with shock, regret, and something he himself did not recognize, a flash of wild joy. Yes, it is I. I watched his shattered expression, feeling nothing but the cold satisfaction of revenge. Xiaoyan. It has been 7 years. I have returned to reclaim everything that should have been mine. He stared at me, lips trembling, as though wanting to speak yet unable to form words. His eyes held too many emotions, disbelief, guilt, bewilderment. You are not dead, he whispered. After I left for the western regions, the Shen family had announced that I had succumbed to illness in that harsh climate. Sorry to disappoint you, I regarded him coldly. Not only am I alive, I am thriving. Thriving enough to determine your fate, your future at will. He stumbled forward a step, reaching for my hand, his eyes pleading and vulnerable. Ching Ching, back then, I wronged you. Silence. I cut him off sharply. Do not call me Ching Ching. You have no right. I do not wish to hear a single word about the past. Xiaoyan, I ask you only this. Do you accept my terms or not? Resolute eyes and the color drained from his face. He understood the woman before him was no longer the Shen Wanxing who had once hung on his every word, who had adored him with all her heart. She was a flower of vengeance risen from the depths of hell, beautiful and lethally poisonous. At last, he closed his eyes in defeat and nodded, his voice hoarse. I accept. Power and ambition had triumphed over his pitiful pretense of love and remorse. I had expected nothing less. I knew him better than anyone. At his core, he was selfish, ruthless, willing to do whatever it took to achieve his ends. Excellent. I replaced the mask. Within 3 days, I will have the grain's location delivered to you. And within 1 month, I expect to see a letter of divorce from the prince's household and an imperial decree welcoming me as your bride. Without another glance at him, I turned and left. As I stepped through the study door, I heard behind me a strangled, anguished cry. At last, a smile of victory curved my lips. Over the following month, 2 momentous events shook the capital. First, the Prince of Jing moved with decisive speed to recover the intercepted grain within the deadline. Not only did he redeem himself, but he followed the trail to uncover evidence of the third prince's embezzlement and factional scheming. His Majesty was greatly pleased and rewarded the prince with significant new responsibilities. The third prince was confined to the imperial clan court, his influence utterly destroyed. The Prince of Jing's star rose meteorically. He returned to the center of power. Second came the divorce, a single document, citing 7 years without issue and jealous, unvirtuous conduct, reduced the once glorious Princess of Jing. Shenmyoro, to a commoner. The news set the entire city buzzing. At the time, I was in my private chamber atop Yunding Tower, sipping newly arrived Western grape wine while Amma N delivered her report. Mistress, when Shenmyoro was expelled from the prince's residence, she left with virtually nothing. She tried to return to the Shen household, but they barred the gates against her. Now her gambling-addicted brother has taken her in. Word is he intends to sell her to a pleasure house to cover his debts. I swirled the ruby liquid in my glass and replied evenly. Keep watch over her. Don't let her die. I want her alive to witness piece by piece how I reclaim everything she once stole from me. Yes, mistress. A fortnight later, the imperial decree of betrothal arrived. Asterisks by heaven's mandate, the emperor proclaims. The merchant woman Qing of the western regions is possessed of integrity, diligence, gentle virtue, and talents that may strengthen the nation and enrich the realm. She is hereby bestowed in marriage upon Prince Xiaoyan of Jing as his principal wife. Let an auspicious date be chosen for the wedding, so it is decreed. Asterisk, when the proclamation was read, the capital erupted. No one had imagined that the mysterious, fabulously wealthy Master Qing would marry the recently divorced prince. Speculation ran wild. Some said the prince wanted her fortune, others that she had bewitched him with feminine wiles. But no one guessed the truth. On my wedding day, the procession stretched 10 li once more. It was even grander than Shenmyoro's had been, because I had assembled this dowry myself. 128 chests, stretching from Yunding Tower to the prince's gates. Gold and silver, jewels, silks, antiques, and paintings dazzled every eye. I wore crimson bridal robes, my face veiled, and walked step by step into the residence I had been denied 7 years before. That night, in the wedding chamber, Xiaoyan lifted my veil. His eyes held wonder, complexity, and something he tried to conceal, longing. Qing, you are so beautiful today. He reached to touch my face. I turned aside, my voice cool. Your Highness, ours is merely a transaction. You have gained the power you sought. I have gained the status I required. We each take what we need. Nothing more. Henceforth, you walk your sunlit road, and I cross my narrow bridge. His hand froze in mid-air, a flicker of hurt crossing his features. Can we not return to how things were? I know I was wrong, Qing. Give me another chance. Please return to how things were. I laughed as though I had heard the most absurd joke imaginable. Xiaoyan, have you forgotten? 7 years ago, before all the capital, you declared I was fit only to be your concubine. You trampled my dignity and my family's honor into the dust for Shenmaru's sake. I looked him in the eye and spoke each word distinctly. That is impossible now. From the moment I was sent to the western regions, Shen Wangqing's heart died. The woman standing here is merely a merchant bent on vengeance. My words extinguished his last illusion. He closed his eyes in pain and said quietly, I understand. That night, he slept in his study. From that day forward, I became the rightful mistress of the prince's household. My first act was to erase every trace of Shenmyoro. Her belongings were distributed among the servants. Her favorite flowers were uprooted and replaced with rare Western varieties I had brought. Her trusted attendants were sold off. With swift, decisive measures, I brought the entire household firmly under my control. Xiaoyan neither interfered nor objected. He left everything to my discretion. He seemed to believe that indulging me might somehow atone for the past. He began spending his nights in my quarters, undeterred by my cold words and distant manner. He served me at meals, read to me by lamplight, and when I fell ill with a chill, he sat at my bedside for 3 days and nights without rest. He performed every duty a husband might, attempting through patience and tenderness to thaw my frozen heart. Once, deep in his cups, he grasped my hand and called my name again and again. He said, Qing, I regret it, I truly do. Not a single day of these 7 years passed without my thinking of you. Marrying Shenmyoro was the greatest mistake of my life. I thought I loved her. But when you returned, I realized my heart has only ever held you. His words were fervent, his eyes red-rimmed. Had the Shen Wangqing of 7 years ago heard such a confession, she would have wept with emotion and forgiven everything. But I was no longer that girl. I calmly withdrew my hand and said without warmth, "Your Highness, you are drunk. You should rest." His passion struck me as nothing more than belated, cheap self-indulgence. I used my position as princess and my own resources to cultivate connections among the capital's elite, to place loyal people in key positions, to expand my influence steadily. I even persuaded the emperor to open additional trading ports, extending my commercial empire from the western regions to the southern provinces. My reputation grew. People no longer addressed me merely as princess. They spoke respectfully of Lady Qing. They understood that the true power behind the scenes was mine, not that of the prince who relied upon me more with each passing day. Xiao Yan seemed content with this arrangement. He delegated ever more affairs to me, while he himself played the role of an ordinary husband, cooking for me, inquiring after my health. He appeared to hope that such devotion might change my heart. Sometimes, watching his busy silhouette, I felt a moment's disorientation. He truly seemed changed, less consumed by ambition, more like a man who genuinely loved me. But whenever such thoughts arose, I crushed them immediately. I would never forget that rainy night 7 years ago, his icy gaze, his merciless words. A shattered mirror cannot be made whole again. My revenge was not yet complete. At Xiao Yan's birthday celebration, I prepared a special gift for him. The banquet hall overflowed with guests, imperial relatives, senior ministers, everyone of consequence. Xiao Yan sat in the place of honor, surveying the arrangements I had made, his eyes full of gratitude and contentment. After several rounds of toasts, I rose, cup in hand, and addressed the assembly with a smile. Today marks His Highness's birthday. I have arranged for a reunion with an old acquaintance. I am certain His Highness will be delighted. As curious gazes turned toward me, I clapped my hands. 2 stout matrons dragged forward a ragged, disheveled woman. She was gaunt and hollow-eyed, her clothing in tatters, her body giving off a sour, unpleasant odor. Guests recoiled, covering their noses, staring at this apparent beggar who had materialized in their midst. Xiao Yan, too, looked bewildered. Qing, what is this? I approached the woman, gripped her chin, and forced her face upward, revealing features that, beneath the grime, still bore traces of former beauty. Shenmiaru, Summoning gasped. Indeed, this creature, indistinguishable from a street beggar, was the former princess of Jing. The hall fell deathly silent. Xiao Yan shot to his feet, his face bloodless, staring in disbelief. I released her, letting Shenmiaru crumple to the floor, and began to speak. My voice was not loud, but it carried clearly to every corner. Many of you may not know the full story. 7 years ago, I was betrothed to the prince. On the eve of our wedding, he publicly broke the engagement. His reason, this pitiable half-sister of mine, Shenmiaru. At the time, His Highness declared that his one true love was Rua, and that I, Shen Wangqing, if I insisted on entering his household, was fit only to be a concubine. To make way for their great romance, I was sent to the western regions, where I nearly perished. Meanwhile, they enjoyed endless glory and splendor here in the capital. My words fell like thunderclaps among the guests. They had all heard rumors of the prince's broken engagement years ago, but none had known the full truth. I turned to Xiao Yan. He was trembling, his lips white, wanting to stop me yet unable to produce a sound. I paid him no heed and continued. 7 years later, I returned. His Highness then told me he regretted everything, that he had discovered the one he truly loved was me all along. So he cast aside this woman with whom he had once sworn eternal devotion, drove her from his household, and left her to fend for herself. I walked to where Shenmiaru lay and looked down at her, a note of pity in my voice. Shenmiaru, look at the man before you. He abandoned me for you once. Today he abandons you for me. Tomorrow he will abandon us both for greater power. In his heart, there has never been love, only himself. Number. That is not true. Shenmiaru crawled frantically toward Xiao Yan, clutching at his robes, sobbing. Your Highness, tell them, you loved me once. Xiao Yan's face had turned the color of ash. Under the weight of countless stares under my unrelenting gaze, he slowly kicked Shen Miaru away. "Get off me, you madwoman." She fell sprawling. She stared up at him, and the last spark of light in her eyes died. Ha 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 ha. She began to laugh wild, unhinged laughter, pointing at Xiao Yan, then at me. "Retribution. This is retribution, Xiao Yan. You hypocrite. Shen Wanqing, you viper. You viper. You will both come to bad ends." I watched coldly as the matrons dragged her away, then turned to face Xiao Yan, whose expression had crumbled entirely. "Your Highness, I trust you enjoyed your birthday gift." He looked at me, his eyes filled with terror, despair, and mute pleading. He understood. What I had done today destroyed not only Shen Miaro, but also the image of devoted constancy he had cultivated for years. From this day forward, he would be known as a faithless man who discarded women at will for the sake of wealth and power. "Shen Wanqing, you. How ruthless you are." The words ground out between his teeth. Ruthless. I laughed until tears nearly spilled. My ruthlessness is not 1/10,000th of the suffering you two inflicted upon me. Xiao Yan, this is only the beginning. I intend not merely to ruin your reputation. I intend to take from you the thing you treasure most. With that, I drew a letter from my sleeve and held it high for all to see. This is a confession written by the third prince during his confinement. It details how you and he conspired years ago to engineer that broken engagement, specifically to undermine my father's influence at court. You never loved Shen Miaru. You married her only because you needed a pliable pawn to humiliate the Shen family. Your celebrated love story was nothing but a political scheme from start to finish. Gasps echoed through the hall. Xiao Yan's face went grey as death. He lunged toward me, but my guards seized him and held him fast. You are lying," he screamed. "Whether I am lying can easily be determined. Present this letter to His Majesty, and the truth will out." I handed the letter to my uncle, who stood behind me. General Zhou Yi had appeared at the hall's entrance at some point, clad in armor, a company of soldiers at his back. Since my return to the capital, my uncle had been quietly gathering evidence. This letter had been obtained by leveraging the third prince's family. Xiao Yan collapsed to the floor. He knew it was over, deceiving the emperor. Factional conspiracy, framing loyal ministers. Any single charge was enough to destroy him utterly. I approached, crouched before him, and looked into his hollow, despairing eyes. In a voice only we two could hear, I said softly, "Xiao Yan, you have lost. Lost to the woman you discarded like rubbish 7 years ago." He gazed at me, and 2 lines of bitter tears traced down his cheeks. 3 days later, the imperial decree was issued. Prince Xiao Yan of Jing, found guilty of conspiracy and framing loyal officials, was stripped of his title, reduced to commoner status, and confined to his residence for life, forbidden to leave without imperial summons. As for me, Shen Wanqing, in recognition of my service in exposing the plot and my substantial contributions to the imperial treasury over the years, I was granted the extraordinary title of Protector Duchess, with an estate of 1,000 households, a rank equivalent to that of a princess. I stood at the highest point of what had been the prince's residence, now the Protector Duchess's mansion, and gazed out over the capital. Arma N asked quietly from behind me, "Mistress, what shall be done with Xiao Yan?" I was silent for a moment, then replied evenly, "Confine him in the most remote woodshed in the rear courtyard. 1 meal a day, enough to keep him alive. I want him to live, to watch with his own eyes as I possess everything he ever dreamed of, thriving and flourishing. I want him to spend the rest of his days repenting his sins. This was my cruelest, most perfect revenge. As for me, the road ahead stretches far. The camel bells of the western regions, the silk and bamboo rains of the south, they all await me still. This vast world beneath heaven holds nothing now that can bind Shen Wanqing's step." Dear rational thinkers, the story ends here. Let us conduct a brief strategic review. The core logic of this tale can be summarized in a single sentence. If you enjoyed this cool, detached narrative style, do follow me. In the next story, we shall continue dissecting the game theory of human nature.